Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we learned about William Shakespeare's life and works, especially Shakespearean sonnets. In this video, we are going to learn Sonnet 29. First, let's learn something about the background of the sonnet. Sonnet 29 is not explicit about its setting, or rather, we do not know much about its setting. Nothing clearly suggests that the poem is autobiographical or that the speaker is Shakespeare himself. But it is most likely that the setting is London, the city where Shakespeare made his career as a playwright and actor, and where he mixed with members of the aristocracy despite coming from common roots. It was not easy in that society for a common man like Shakespeare to be successful. Let's learn something more about the society in which he lived. Shakespeare lived during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Colonial explorations began during this period, and England's medieval feudalist agricultural society was slowly transforming into a capitalist society. It was reflected in the class consciousness of the Elizabethan people. Elizabethans jealously guarded class and professional distinctions. The society was divided based on the wealth and social status of people. For example, they even passed laws regulating what clothes each class could wear and prosecuted people wearing the wrong clothes. Which means, in that society, one could identify a person's class from the clothes that he wore. The poem's setting is the Elizabethan society, where wealth and social prestige determine one's capacity to succeed in life. The speaker in the poem is someone fallen from grace and going through the anguish and depression of being an outcast. Some believe that the speaker is Shakespeare himself. Let's see why. Sonnet 29 was published in 1609, but it is believed that it was written much earlier. In 1592 and 1593, the health authorities of London ordered the theatres to remain closed in an effort to slow the spread of the plague at public gatherings. It is believed that Shakespeare, whose career as an actor and dramatist was stalled by the theatre closings, wrote his sonnets during this time of unemployment. Thus, many attribute the speaker's depression in the sonnet to Shakespeare's own unhappiness. Before discussing the meanings and explanations, let's read the poem once. Shakespeare's sonnets are usually mentioned with their first lines. Sonnet 29. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at the heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Now let's look at the meaning of these lines. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state. In disgrace means not favored by men and fortune. Beweep means weep over the outcast condition. The meaning of these two lines goes like this. When my luck turns bad and people look down on me, I sit by myself and cry because I'm all alone. And trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. It means, and I pray to God who doesn't listen or answer my prayers, and I look at my life and curse the way it's turned out. Now let's look at the explanation of these four lines or the first quatrain. The speaker begins by declaring that he is doubly in disgrace. Both fortune and other people have turned against him. Fortune is personified here. The speaker suggests that fortune itself is making judgments about him, that fortune has its own intelligence and thoughts, and thus has its own capacity to affect the speaker's life. The lines are highly charged with emotion. When the speaker is not weeping, he is crying out to the heaven and cursing his fate. In the third line, there is a phrase, deaf heaven. It is a reference to God, and the poet is trying to tell that the speaker feels that the heaven turns a deaf ear to his complaints and laments. There is a reference to the biblical story of Job here. Job is a character in the Old Testament Bible. He was cast out on a dung heap and he cried over his state. Who was actually Job? Job was a God fearing and wealthy man. But Satan tells God that it was due to his fortune that Job remained so pious. God allows Satan to take away from Job all that he had, including his children. He was also tested with a skin disease. Job could not understand why he was forsaken by God, but still he didn't curse God. He felt that God was not listening to his prayers. Finally, pleased with Job, God returned to him everything that was taken away. As we have seen earlier, the reference to the outcast state in the second line must be a reference to, it could be possibly an allusion to his lack of work as an actor due to the closing of theatres in 1592 during the outbreak of plague. It also could be a reference to the attack on Shakespeare at the hands of fellow playwright Robert Greene. Greene had called Shakespeare an upstart crow. Now let's move on to the next four lines or the next quatrain of the poem. Wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Which means wishing that I was like someone with better prospects, with better fortune, that I was more beautiful, that I had more influential friends, wishing that I had this man's skill and that man's opportunities. And even the things I love best don't bring me any pleasure. After describing his outcast state and unanswered prayers, the speaker compares himself to others around him. He wishes for more hope in his life about future like others, like the people around him. He wants their looks or feature. He wants good friends that they have. He would like to have the skills that some of them have, the opportunities and freedom that some of them have. And now what he feels is that things that once he enjoyed do not make him happy at all. So these two quatrains describes how the speaker is unhappy, he is all alone, he is depressed, and all the more he is jealous of people around him. The third quatrain and the couplet of the sonnet we'll discuss in our next video. Thank you for watching.